And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Latest Web Trends for Planning a Redesign. My name is Brian Munson. I am the Director of Member Development for NCBA CLUSA, and I'll be your moderator today. Our panelists are all part of the MindActive Design Development and Strategy team. Please welcome with me Byron Sletton and Philip Hamilton. Max Davies is running just a little bit behind, but I think he's going to join us a little bit later. So just after a few bits of housekeeping, I'm going to have them introduce themselves and we'll be able to get started. So just very quickly, all the participant phone lines today will be muted during this presentation to reduce background noise. That said, though, we encourage you to ask our panelists questions. So if you have them, please type them in the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel that's on your screen. We'll be able to answer your questions as time allows towards the end of the webinar. The second thing, NCBA CLUSA will be recording this webinar, and it will be archived on our website, and you will receive an email that contains the link sometime early next week. This webinar, just a little bit of background, this webinar is the sixth in a series of educational demos that's been presented by NCBA CLUSA and our associate members. Associate members of NCBA CLUSA are service providers with a defined expertise, and the aim of this series is really to help co-ops navigate certain business challenges that are common to all the sectors. So as one of these associate members, MindActive provides their clients with a full spectrum of e-marketing, e-commerce, and web design services, from corporate identities and internet branding to video graphics, as you just saw, to online communication tools. They focus on a variety of industries, namely healthcare, technology, telecommunications, consumer hard goods, fashion, food, beverages, entertainment, and of course co-ops. And they've actually been instrumental in a number of NCBA projects over the past year. Today what we're going to go and review is shifting trends in mobile use, media-centric sites, publishing content for the non-technical, contemporary design trends, social media tips, new interactive tools for co-ops, and the latest in search engine optimization. As I said, we'll plan on a bit of Q&A at the end, but please feel free to type your questions in the box as we move along. I'm now going to turn the webinar over to Byron and Philip.
Well, greetings, everybody. This is Byron. And one of the things that we get asked a lot here is, when is a good time for us to think about a redesign? Most of the clients at this stage, most of the requests that we have are for redesigns. And that's pretty obvious because, the web's been around a while, and there's always the need for updating and makeovers and improving what you're doing as an online footprint. So we thought we'd put together something that was very specific to kind of tips and tricks or things you should know, things you should be aware of as you're considering a process, which it really is, a process of redesign, assuming, of course, that you already have a presence and may not be happy with that, or maybe looking at to, sort of rebrand or remake over kind of your look and feel. There are also some very specific reasons why you would want to do that now. And believe me, we understand that it's a painful process, and it's a thing that clients go through. We go through it with them. We hold their hands. We dry their tears, and also try to improve and make it as painless as possible. But it is a process, and for that reason, it can be postponed, and we'll get around to it at some point, and maybe next year, maybe when we have the time. I guess our point for this webinar specifically has to do with why now might be a good time to do that. And we have kind of outlined some reasons that would be a good thing and why. And most of that has to do with the changing technology and changing usage of your audience. And this has happened for very specific reasons over the last couple of years that really now make it important for you to understand what you're doing online with your co-op. and what your messaging is and how you're reaching people. So one of the things that we're going to try to do is compare shifting trends from then to now, and why your website was probably performing pretty well before, but now needs to have some new functionality and potentially a new approach to design. So as we go through these I should say, 7 or 8 little points here, I mean, each one of these elements or content buckets could be its own webinar, just on social media or on SEO. I mean, each one of these things could involve a 45-minute or even longer discussion. But so we don't really want to get too far into the weeds on anything specific. We want to kind of make a comparison about the trends and why that would be relevant now. Keep it fairly top level, and if you have specific questions about these things, certainly fire off the question, and or if we need to come back and do another webinar, we'd be happy to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the things that we want to talk about is the changing demographic on mobile use. And the use of mobile, by that I mean mobile devices, namely tablets, cell phones, smartphones, things of that nature, has really fundamentally changed the way people experience websites. And by that we mean that there are some very specific changes statistically with how this is working. So we'll go to the next slide. Some interesting stats here on mobile. 40% of trying to view these websites. It's going to be a huge thing. By 2015, they're expecting it's going to be even bigger than desktop internet. So I guess the question you would have is, what does your site look like on that mobile device? Easy enough to see. You've probably already looked at it. And you have to kind of look at what the viewer what that viewer experience is like. And do you like what you see? It might work fine on an iPad or an Android tablet, but might look really bad on a cell phone. So here's the difference. It used to be that the process by which you would look at a mobile site required you to have a different layout for a mobile device. And part of that has to do with the usage of the mobile phone itself and those devices that required you to have that redesign. So it was somewhat of a difficult and could be expensive process to design all those things for all those different screens. We are now in an age where there is something called responsive design, which is an approach to the layout that senses the screen size and accommodates for it automatically. And that really is a fundamental change in terms of how you develop for the web. And so you could have one design now and update that design, and it is responsive to all of the various screen sizes: horizontal, vertical, iPad, iPhone, Android, etc. This is a big deal, and almost all of the content management systems that we employ right now are all responsive design. There really is no reason why you wouldn't want one.
And that's a little bit different as well in terms of a thought process. A lot of times in the past, we've built large-scale content management systems, and companies have very large sites and deployed different functions and features and media and publishing within that site ongoing. And it was really difficult to translate all of that to mobile. And today, with a more responsive approach, in keeping with that continued evolution of publishing content and getting your message out, getting media refreshed up on a website, it's now able to be responsive, as Byron said. So you're going from a web view on a website or a tablet down to a cell phone, which is becoming, as you saw in some of the statistics earlier, the largest, fastest growing way to share, view, and digest media in small bites, and access websites very quickly for information, for usage, for particular tasks. And now it's become very important to keep that in a very responsive way so that the text is legible. Input screens for forms that people can fill out can be done via a mobile device, and so on. So
I think that the other point to make here is the distinction that we would make between a mobile responsive design and an app, a mobile app. So there are some things we could talk about that are insightful in terms of why those are different things and why the functionality should be different for a website versus a web app or a mobile app. So we can talk about that a little bit. There are some useful distinctions, but for a lot of people, if you have a good responsive design, you can have a lot of the same functionality as you may or may want in an app itself. So the next point we want to make is the changing usage of media. And we all know this. This is not something that we really need to beat up too much. I mean, we're all, consumers of this stuff ourselves on our devices. And we as consumers and audience, appreciate being served up entertaining and engaging content. And for a lot of the younger audience that we have that experience things on mobile devices, media becomes a huge part of it. And I guess why that is different now as opposed to even a few years ago is the ease by which you can both create that content and serve it up in a variety of ways. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
And even to share that content. And I think that this brings up a very important point. A lot of companies and people tend to want to push out a news article or information about a new product or a new service or something that they're doing, and yet that's important. It's also very important to include imagery that is impactful with that content, as well as video that might be impactful. It might not be your video. It might be video that just helps represent that in a really strong way, but that with each press release or with each article that's published in your site, it's important to include that media, because that's really what's grabbing, especially on a mobile device, especially on a tablet, and especially now stepping into the era of including things like social media, things like publishing in those different realms, which we're going to kind of roll this into how that affects SEO at the end of the day, which will come back around to a lot of these points when we get to that, because that becomes very important.
A couple of things that really changed a lot in the last few years is basically bandwidth. It is now possible to serve up some pretty powerful kind of stuff via your computer. Bandwidth has become a lot less of a limitation. We also have plenty of services now that are being used, Vimeo and YouTube, for instance, the two big players that serve up content for free and allow you to have a YouTube channel or a Vimeo channel that you can use and put into your website and embed that content. So the other thing that's also very significant is that we all carry around basically a small production device in our pockets. And the use of video, even for kind of casual sort of clips and such, it cannot be underestimated in terms of how people can grab message and content with things that they're carrying around with them every day.
And that's pretty important, because I think the world today, we produce, even for a lot of our clients, really high-end production quality level, TV commercial level video, and a lot of time that's not as impactful in a lot of ways to the video that's produced by an iPhone at an event or at something that really touches the end user customer of maybe one of your co-ops or of a different sector in use. So being able to publish that right from your phone to a YouTube and have that show up in a Facebook or a Twitter or on the website in some way starts to bring life to that website. It starts to allow the consumers to understand and see the relationships and the ethos of that business in a more personal way. And I think that really lends itself more today than it did in any other time. We
were doing a year or so ago, we were doing an event for a nonprofit thing in a park. It's pretty cool. It was 1,000 origami cranes that were 4 foot in diameter, and the money was raised for the first responders. But in any case, so it was a day-long event outside, and one of the people that was kind of walking around said, you know, I had this camera in this radio-controlled airplane, and I shot some overhead stuff of your installation. It was, you know, a quarter mile across. Would you be interested in having that? Like, yeah, that would be great. That would be wonderful. So, and he said, all right, I'll put it up on YouTube and you can pull it off and you can grab it, you know, that night or that day. And it was posted literally the next day. So, I mean, these are things that have become almost ubiquitous in terms of grabbing things, drones and GoPro cameras and all sorts of interesting ways that never existed before. And I think that also the idea of media usage is what people really are expecting now. They would actually prefer to watch a tutorial on how to fix the carburetor than read a white paper on it. The next thing, this has been a point that we're always trying to make to clients in a redesign, is that you need to think about your site being a publication. And by that we mean, you know, that the content that you're doing, which is the articles or the blog pieces or the photos you're posting, need to be fresh, they need to be updated. We're in a stage now where the process by which you can do that is really, really simple. We'll talk about that in a second and how that could work, but the paradigm is no more, I'm going to go to press and print this and then I don't have to deal with it for another couple of years. There are several reasons, not only for interest, you know, from the audience, but now Google is looking very carefully at the freshness of your content. The relevance of it is connected to how recently it was published. And if your content has been sitting there for 6 months or 8 months or even a year, you wouldn't be, I mean, you would be amazed. Some people have websites that are 4 years old, they never changed it. And the process now with content management systems is so much easier for non-technical people to be a publication. And so we encourage everyone to think about their site as a redesign, as a magazine, maybe it's a monthly. I mean, I don't literally mean a magazine. I mean in terms of how the content is approached and how it's fresh and how it is timely. And so the process by which that happens now is so much easier. Then you don't have to have a web designer, you don't have to have a technical person to do that. It's basically just a writer who creates the copy and saves a draft. Someone has an approval process, it's manually added, and the content management system is used to publish it. It keeps track of all of your dates in which you publish, you can schedule that, and you can lay it out very easily as you would in just a Word doc. So if you're not familiar with content management systems, they've been around quite a long time, but they are now kind of the rule rather than the exception.
And I think this applies for pretty much everyone. And you might think of that and go, well, I'm a credit union and I have a bank and I have a bank website and it needs to be very, very corporate. It needs to have very defined things within it, and these are my services and these are my products, and they don't change all that often. And you're right, those things need to be there. However, parts of the website need to have some activity, and it's, again, a thought might be that it's a window into the operation, a window into your business and how your people are, so that when people come and engage, they already know the people and the ethos and the feel of, I want to work with these people because they're doing great things, or they're involved in great things, or they like to go fishing or golfing or this or that or the other thing. And that adds to what people are looking for today as a consumer wanting to engage with a business. They want to have a feeling that they're part of that business, that they relate to that business in some way.
So I want to kind of give you some meat and potatoes here, because we've been kind of talking very top-level stuff, but I think it would be good to sort of drill into this a little bit more in terms of how a content management system, if you haven't used them, and potentially you have one but would like to use it in a more efficient way, This is a workflow example that shows some of the robust nature of how collaborative it can be. So you think about a content management system, which is basically a platform for publishing. And the big players in CMSs are obviously WordPress is a big one, Joomla, Drupal. There's a few more. There are also some proprietary systems as well. But the big ones are those three. And they all kind of operate in a similar way, but I mean there are some very different sort of values for one, versus the other. But the notion of being an author and having a set group of people that publish and have it be kind of a staging area where the content can be scheduled, photos can be created, articles can be ready to go, and there is a process by which there can be an approval. So you could have multiple people with the ability to log on to these systems through a kind of a dashboard-like thing, and they can publish, or I should say they can stage their articles, embed videos, publish photos, get everything ready to go, and then that can be approved by someone in the administration function. And then once that then goes into the CMS, there's all kinds of other things that can happen that have value. It isn't just a place for people to see the article. It can actually be used as links, deep links, to reference things like through Twitter and through Facebook, LinkedIn. And those articles have a unique identifier link that allows you to go directly to that article. That's really important because you don't want to have to send someone just to your website. You might want to have them just go to an article that you just recently published. So the content management system allows you to do that, and then the stakeholders in the organization, in the co-op themselves, can decide how all that gets parsed out.
Because that's important too. I mean, things have changed. A couple of years ago it was the three-click rule, where the idea would be that when you want to drive someone to content, you give them no more than 3 clicks to get to that content. And today it's even more important to have 1 click. Literally a call to action that exists. Many websites today are changing to a very large-scale banner that is the main driver for people to understand what the site's about, what the ethos is in the company, what the message is, and they read that message and they have a call to action button to go do something, to go right to a particular piece of content, to go right to an engagement that needs to then happen, a 1, 2, 3 step. But right when I get there with my phone or my tablet or my computer, I know what to do, and I'm going to go right here to go do that. And that becomes, I think, pretty important today because, again, to Byron's point, you're publishing content and you want to go out there and get that content out to other people and in other locations like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube and such. And then you want to drive them directly to that content so that information becomes very poignant, and we always want to drive them back to the websites that exist. And there's a couple of interesting techniques to do that. When we design sites and we design pages, we create the ability with those articles to be able to simply press a button within the article and push that location out to Facebook, push that location out to Twitter, get it out to Reddit and Dig for national publication. And if you're publishing content that is of a timely nature and informative about a particular thing that's going on, you're going to catch the wave. And it's going to drive the users that you're looking for to get that information on your site.
And that in that process that you become kind of an author and an authority on that content. So that's another thing we'll talk a little bit about, how that is relevant to search optimization. We'll talk just briefly about design trends and how that's moved even in the past couple of years. It really doesn't have so much to do with what you like or don't like. It's just simply the fact of how things have changed. You might not like it at all. But it has to do with how people want to interact visually with both navigation, the look and feel, the personality of your site. What does it currently mean to be sophisticated, to have a sophisticated design? And that has changed.
And we call it UI and UX, user interface and user experience, and really that process has now become more hand in hand. And as you can see, design has really moved from more to less, from being more realistic to being more iconic, from being simple, elegant little buttons that are very contemporary, small little text to much more clean, finalized text. You'll see it if you kind of look at the old OS and the mobile phone for Apple to what it now is. It's much more elegant. It has much more transparencies, not so many shadows, not so many things trying to be like real-world objects, and more so trying to iconify those.
I think a lot of it has to do with the influence of infographics. The way that people like to kind of consume information now is visually, and that has influenced the what we call kind of a vectorized approach, flat, clean design, and also Philip mentioned the idea of a one-click. That, from a design standpoint, means that you go to a website and you only have to go to one click to join up, to learn more, to whatever you want. It's a one-click suggestion. Not a rule, but a suggestion to say, here are the 4 things, maybe the 2 things that everybody really wants when they go to our site. Let's take those 2 things through our analytics and understand what those 2 things are and make that as simple and as straightforward as possible. So it's right there prominent. Donate, join, order something, subscribe, whatever that call to action is, we're seeing now is very clear, very simple, no work, no work to do it at all. A couple of examples of sort of then and now is, as Philip was saying, is sort of this realistic icon, this realistic shape of the Safari browser has just moved to something really super simple. We think that the mobile world has influenced this as much as anything. When an icon has to be, less than a 1/4 inch for a visual to be understood, that really means that you've got to simplify and pare down. Apple has they've just been a great example of the points I guess we're trying to make. And again, you may or may not like them, but this is the way that things have moved from kind of a glassy, drop shadowed, 3D kind of quality in terms of design elements to something that's vectored. So think of it as moving from Photoshop to Illustrator, basically.
And I think, we're showing Apple here, but, it's happening on Android. It's happening on Windows mobile phones. I mean, with Microsoft's Grid, with Android's layouts, they're very much headed that same direction. They're giving you really beautiful eye candy with their wonderful screens and the backgrounds with motion and imagery that responds to the device. But then on top of that, the icons are becoming very clean and crisp and easy to understand and directing you very quickly and easily, almost intuitively. So again, when we get that call to action, you've got a co-op that does something really, really well. Those points of business we need to make into those kind of calls to action. So that becomes the idea.
We often think about the graphics on a website as being like billboards along the highway, and your attention span of your average user is about 5 seconds, and before they either go on or lose interest or try to find something else or whatever it might be, and that analogy to sort of driving down at 65 miles an hour down the highway to a billboard is: do you see it? Do you understand it? How long is that going to take?
And a paragraph of text is not going to be readable or understandable. A concept needs to be boiled down to a word or to a series of words that deliver that message in that same way. Somebody wearing a jacket out in the snow, stay warm. Okay, I get it. We're selling jackets. We're selling apparel. or we're selling that experience, one or the other. You know, I mean, you've got to, and then giving that person a direct link right to get to that item becomes, I think, very important.
So from a design standpoint, this may be a big reason why you want to be somewhat critical about your current site, and another reason to think about a redesign. In terms of an approach, the visuals, the personality that you're conveying, the emotion that you may be connecting to, and the level of sophistication of the consumer is pretty high bar right now in terms of what people are expecting to view and how they begin to lose patience quite quickly. So I think the navigation thing, we were talking about that too. I think the trend has been to move away from, I mean, we still have, you know, top navigational structures, we still have information architecture and how that hierarchy kind of can flow. So that's still there. But what we've seen is that there's almost a secondary element, or maybe even a primary, depending on how you look at it, which is the thing you do first when you first go, which is the navigation that's the easiest. So, for instance, if you have something about careers, and it is important for people to have that on your access on your website, that might not require you to be, that might be a navigation element that's at the footer. You know, that might be somewhere that is still there, but it's not a prime driver. It's not a prime emotional driver for the site itself.
And as well, one of the major design trends in sites, and you know, we've all heard different things over the years and had different thoughts. Well, nobody likes to scroll on a computer, so you want all of these things above the fold, and you know, how do I get more of these things above the fold? Well, now things, instead of going from page to page to page and reload, the design trend is to put it all on one page and allow that to scroll, but to scroll more in an automatic sense. So when you click on a top-level navigation, it literally moves down the page, and that allows for that responsive approach for when I go to a mobile device and I can swipe, which everybody loves to swipe, which is scrolling on a mobile device. To get to these call to actions that can all be there. And these can be very modularized within the site structure of a content management system. So it becomes interesting how we play with that, and part of the strategic approach as to how we want to deliver that, what are the important features, and how we might move those around over time based on usage and importance through analytics.
Social media is obviously something that we could just talk about. I mean, it's a hot topic. It could require a whole discussion. And so we want to kind of keep this real top level. But basically what we see is first of all, there is a distinction between, you know, just the category of social media use and social media marketing. It's like I could be using email, but I also get email marketing. So, and that can be good and bad depending on how you look at it. So social media can be a personal connection that you have with your friends, your relatives, whatever that might be, that has absolutely nothing to do with business, and in fact started that way. Well, then the businesses got to decide that, well, you know, this is a marketing gold mine, because we got all these people, we got all these fish in there, we're going to go where the fish are, and we're going to like drop the hooks in and see what happens. Consequently, now we have what's the category of social media marketing. And I always like to draw that distinction, because as soon as you tread lightly or heavy-handed, I should say, as soon as you tread in a heavy way on the expectation of being social and try to do it in a marketing fashion and maybe in a push or traditional sort of process, you will be spanked badly. And you know, people don't want that. Now, there's a tolerance for it, you know, but at the same time, if our recommendation is that if you want to do things with social media, that it be adhere to some specific best practices. And I think this is not rocket. You don't need a guru for this. This is basic stuff. You know, it's about what people want, whether or not the content that you're serving up is something that you're willing to share, and you know, is it useful? Is it interesting? So it's the same rules as we all kind of want when we have a conversation with someone. Now, this is a the person transcends from a conversation to wanting to sell you something. And at that point you go, well, I got to go. I got to go now.
And from that approach, I mean, what you're kind of saying and how that really relates is, if you think about it, so social media, the first word in that is social. So it's really being social. It's having a handshake. It's being in front of people. It's letting people know what your interests are, what you're doing, why you have passion for the things that you do, and letting people see that, letting people have a window in to see a part of that. And then to find other people like that, to go out as you might be in your co-op, you might want to go out and find some thought leaders in your sector that really speak impactfully or have interests that match yours, and you go follow them, and you like the things that they're talking about, so you hit the like button for them, or you follow and push the same things, or you retweet those same things. And what happens is that they then in turn do the same to you. They'll start to follow you, and they'll start to retweet you. And if you're tweeting or posting about, hey, we've got this new service, that's an advertisement. That's not a, hey, we're doing this great thing in the community. Hey, look at this person that was affected by this. Look at this, new thing that's happening out there. Look at this new tool or this new program and how it's doing things in the community. Share that community, share that interest. And you'll see that when you start to reach out to these others, your posts will start to show up on their timelines, and their people that are following them because they're impacting the world. You're going to be seen in that light. Then they're going to start following you, and then all of a sudden you've changed, and now your brand becomes something that they know and understand. So
I'd like to connect the dots also to the idea of being a publication. So if what you're posting on your website is newsworthy and potentially forward-worthy because it's timely and or interesting and engaging to the audience, then you have something that has a social media relevance. And I think that is really kind of the key there, is that if there is a element to what you would find interesting and someone else would also find interesting, then it's forward-worthy. And that's the kind of the key to making some of this stuff go viral. Like, how does this stuff go all over? How does it get spread this way? Well, it's either controversial, incredibly funny, stupidly ridiculous,
or really cute,
or really has some value. It's like, hey, you may want to check this out. So the publication part of your mindset can also influence how you approach social media and how successful it is. And again, I don't want to make this seem like it's really complicated. The tactics can change. We've got Instagram, Pinterest, we've got a whole bunch of and there's new ones popping up all the time. So, kind of keeping up with some of the tactical elements of social media can be a little daunting. But the basics of it is just, word of mouth, the value of the word of mouth. And so that's not complicated. It just sort of makes sense, right?
And not every piece of social media makes sense for everyone. I mean, it doesn't make sense
absolutely, right.
for certain organizations or certain groups to use Twitter. It just doesn't, really make sense. It makes sense to, focus on a Facebook or a LinkedIn, or something like that, where your business is more a certain way. Then those are the right places to be. Not everybody can tweet. It just doesn't make sense. There's not things happening that are forward-worthy or newsworthy. And again, to tweet about, here's my product or here's my service every 5 minutes isn't going to get you anywhere.
So this little diagram might break down some of the efforts that you could think about in terms of how content gets pushed out through, for lack of a better term, a social media broadcast workflow, and the way that could work with your members, which can be for co-ops, it becomes a really huge value proposition that really makes us different in that world from a traditional, corporate hierarchy. There is a democratization of things that can happen in a co-op that almost are built for social media. I mean, they're really ready-made for that to work well. And so has that caught on? It kind of has, but I don't think it's really caught on as much as it could. I mean, specifically within the co-op ethos. Credit unions are kind of getting that. They're sort of getting the story out that we're different from the traditional hierarchies of the corporate banking systems. We're member-owned, and so, hey, come into our community, come into our join us in this conversation. And there's been some good push on that. And I think that if you look at some of those success stories, they are all about coming together as a community, as members. Again, ready-made for that kind of process, and should be leveraged in really smart ways, I think. So this diagram kind of gets into some of the nuances of that. There's all kinds of new tactics that are coming out online. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the ones that we find interesting lately, if we have time here. The other thing that may be relevant to something new and different is the idea of some very highly interactive tool sets. And this is really draws the distinction between the current website, a modern or contemporary website, and a brochure site. A brochure site is basically somewhere where you talk about your business and you have some contact information.
A trifold for the web.
Yeah, a trifold for the web. So the idea is that you can now have things on your site that allow people to do things. They're high-functioning kinds of things, whether they be on a mobile device or a tablet. This is stuff that was really expensive before and really kind of reserved for the big guys to do things. Pay your bill, find the latest Starbucks near you, things of that nature. So, but now I think we've got the basic stuff that can be built as modules. They don't require you to build them from scratch.
Yeah, and there's different scales for each one of them. I mean, from an event management piece that is a simple module plug-in to one of these CMS systems that allow you to, simply schedule events, receive payments for those schedules, or for those events, or to just raise money, or everything from newsletter publications that start out really small, and it's just a simple newsletter that goes out, to something that has a list of 10 or 20,000 that it costs more money. Lots of little modular calendar, everything kind of feature that you can think of today is now starting to have some sort of modular function out there that can be very cost effective to implement. And
one of the things that on that left, you see the bank on wall, there's a project that we did for the Missouri Credit Union Association, and it's a perfect example of how a website can be both a informational part and also a tool that you can do something with. So you go to this site and you get some value propositions of why credit unions are better, why you should consider them, and why you should move. And at the same time, you go, well, okay, so how do I do that? Where do I find one? Do I qualify? I'm a neophyte, and in my mind, a credit union was always something that I had to have through my job. My dad had one because he worked at the factory or things like that. So all that has changed, and there's a fair amount of people that weren't aware of those kinds of issues. So the website was designed to inform that new kind of story, talk about some value propositions, and then lead you to find a credit union that you qualify for. And if you know anything about credit unions, which I'm sure some of you out there do, there are all these kinds of processes by which you can qualify. It can be a union, it could be an organization, it could be based on your location geographically. So all of those things can be the qualifiers for where you can join. And so somewhat complicated in terms of, somewhat in terms of how you would find that. And it might be just get one where I am right now. Find me the one that is closest to me. And also find one that is based on my employer or my church or my union. So all of those things were part of the search criteria for this mobile app or mobile web view, and allowed people to go and enter that in by zip code or by a variety of search fields. So it's a really powerful thing, and we've looked at this in terms of doing some functionality for locating co-ops, and it certainly would work just fine. So I guess my point is that the process by which these things don't become marketing but become actual tools for doing things and for accomplishing things. And what better call to action than to have a tool that allows you to go find it, make contact, here's my number, it will dial the number on the device for you, and or email or text. So this kind of function, these kinds of tools, I think, are really powerful and can be very useful.
And again, need to be delivered and thought of is not just on the web, but also very useful and accessible via mobile device, because that, in today's world, it's moving very, very quickly, you know, to using it from a mobile device.
Another example is one of our clients is a tree guy. And we said, well, how about we figure out a way that you can go out in your backyard and calculate how much it costs to cut down a tree. So you take your tablet or your phone out, and you can actually go through a step.
So this is for him. Now, he didn't get them all, but he was pretty good.
Byron and Philip, are you still there? It looks like the sound went out for a minute. Can you guys rewind to? You guys had just started to talk about your the business with the tree, and I think you were describing about how you could go outside with your phone, and that's when the sound cut out.
Oh, okay.
And we have just an FYI. We have about 10 minutes left, and we still have some questions that are coming in. So just want to give you guys.
We got about 3 minutes, and then we'll take the questions. The point on this one is basically the idea of providing a tool for this guy to do to have the consumer who wants to cut down a tree to be able to get through, take their mobile device out, and figure out exactly how much it's going to cost to have that tree removed. And then you send that in, and he sends you back a quote, and he honors the quote along with a call to action, you know, and a follow-up.
All happens from the mobile device. So.
And Philip was saying that there's some impressive stats on this. I mean, this guy was getting quotes from, you know, San Francisco and, you know, California, cutting down big trees. But
in less than a year, he had 2,700 quotes that he had given out from the site, which got and increased his business.
So in any case, I also wanted to talk, back 1 second, a paper.li is something that you might want to look at. It's free and allows you to create a newsletter, a custom newsletter that would be of interest to your constituents. So if you go there, you can learn more about that. It's pretty simple to create. We have a paper.li on our website that we've customized for MindActive. In our kind of a newsroom thing. Creates a newspaper that you can kind of vet what you want in there. The other one is, if you haven't heard, Civi CRM is a constituent relations management system. Check that out. And then finally, there's a program called, or a site called Rebel Mouse. Do a Google search on that. That allows you to do real-time posts on your site through Twitter, and it's really awesome for anyone who's doing live either live events or some kind of activities that require you to be on site and post it in real time to a website. It's pretty cool.
And with SEO, I mean, obviously we're running out of time, so we're just going to make it quite brief. You know, things have really changed in the world, not only in terms of the web, but in terms of search relevance. And it's really about a lot of the things that we've been talking about here. It's providing real content on your website, reaching out to others in your association kind of group. You know, an example would be that, you know, if you're a co-op, you ought to have a .coop URL. You ought to have an association with an NCBA as an example, and any other associations that might be related to your industry, and make sure that you're active within those, because that's going to provide relevance back. Things that you're doing there, things that get published, and links that you have, and affiliations that you have, drive right back to your website, and Google starts to say, okay, you are somebody that's important in this thing, and now you're starting to say things both in social media, and you're sharing content, and it's whether it's relevant in that sector or not, you're active, and they see that you're active, and it's no longer a special sauce or secret sauce of I'm going to put these meta tags in here, and I'm going to format my pages. That's still somewhat important, but a lot less important than being active in things today. So
one more point on that is that, you know, used to be good. I think Philip was just saying keyword was important. We're into the page-centric era, and Google, as it should, because it wants to be a good service to you as the user, wants to make sure that you're authentic, you're a real entity, you have authority to say what you're saying, and you're providing relevance to their search. Because if they don't do any of those things, nobody's going to use them when they go to Bing or Yahoo.
Alert from reminders. Proposal for Jack Deeds. Timesheets DB.
I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the value of .coop. And this is really simple. I mean, if you haven't looked at this, you really, really, really should. A .coop is a domain that's reserved specifically for people that qualify as a co-op. So it does a variety of things. It's really cost effective. It's, you know, like free for the first year, and then it's like $150 for the whole year after that. They show that you were really a co-op to the world. The two really big points on that is that all of the relevant domains that you might want, the .coms, almost all of them are taken, unless you want to spend either a lot of money or you get incredibly lucky. So you can actually have a .coop and be exactly what you want to be on the web with your name. You get an automatic listing in the directory.coop, which again provides you some authenticity and relevance to Google. And it also is a unique identifier that once you have this moniker, you're allowed then to use it as a mark on websites and other kinds of promotional material. So it's a badge. It's kind of an approval badge. It's really kind of a no-brainer. I mean, it's what you should have. So one more point on that is that you don't have to have, you can keep a .com and use a .coop as well. So you can kind of do both, keep both of those things going, and you can actually have the .com forward to the .coop as part of that and kind of manage that domain listing. I guess in summary, we just want to kind of think about the value in a really big way, which is that a new web design is almost like a rethinking of so many things from a business strategy and from a mission. And so part of what we go through when we are engaged is that kind of discovery process, which we allow people to, you know, kind of rethink their own, you know, missions and business propositions. What are we saying? How are we saying it? Is there anything new we have to say?
So why don't we ask for questions? You've got some questions for us, Brian?
We do. The first one that we have is, what are your thoughts on using a clickable slideshow on your website?
So again, we often, from a strategic standpoint, look at different industries and say, yes, that we want to have kind of that billboard approach, either something fairly large across the front mast of the website in that above the fold kind of approach, and yes, putting very defined taglines in there so that, again, the concept comes across very clear, the concept matches with the imagery, and then, yes, a link to drive them right to something. So from a clickable slideshow, that becomes very important.
There are also some light box kinds of things that open up in separate windows, allow you to kind of move them around on the page and things of that nature. So they're kind of a slicker presentation.
So we do like those, yeah.
Got it. It looks like the second question we have here is, I keep hearing the term call to action.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give some concrete examples of this? The question goes on to say, I'm inclined to want to give users a variety of choices and let them use the website according to their needs, what they're looking for. I think of the call to action being then use the site as you will. Is that what you mean?
No, I think what we mean is, right, you do want to provide a lot of information. A lot of information is important depending on your business and your organization, and the bits of information can be broad scale. I think you have to figure out a way to, within those positions on the website, whether it's a home page or something like that, to have some real directives. When we say call to action, it might be, hey, come join this webinar. And it's a webinar about this, and you click the button to register.
Think about it
right there.
Yeah, think about it this way. There's traffic, which we can get to a website via a variety of things, that gets eyeballs on it. And then there's a conversion of behavior. The conversion of behavior is the action that you want that traffic to perform. That could be making an order, it could be subscribing to something, it could be, whatever that is. And by call to action, we mean an actable behavior that is driven by some kind of interest. And so the traffic is one thing. You get a ton of traffic. How much of conversion that you have in that process? You could have 1,000 people go to your website a day and nobody converts to any kind of measurable behavior. So that's kind of where we're saying, well, that's not exactly what we want, is it?
So we want that, again, to be one click. So maybe in a home page, it might be a slideshow banner at the top that's going through with different calls to action of 2 or 3 different things. And you have to understand somebody's only going to sit there for so many seconds and watch 2 or 3 of them, so you can't have 10. But as they would go down the page, because now they're engaged with, oh, I understand what this is about, and oh, I'm interested. And then there's other module points that, again, have a one-click call to action. You give a little bit of information, you show a picture, and you have a click button that takes you right to doing something, to an engagement, to might just be read more because you're giving information, but that needs to be very clear. It can't just be a little text link. It needs to be something that stands out. Because again, we got to think about mobile, and a big finger on a swipe of a mobile device. We need to make sure that those call to actions and things to do are very clear.
Yeah, the questioner is right, though. I mean, you as the service are interested in having everybody know everything you do. I want to make sure everybody knows all the stuff that they can do on my site and all my business. But if you actually look at the analytics of what people do, let's say take credit unions, for example, there's probably only 2 things that people really do on a really, check a balance and transfer money. They don't want to read the letter from the president. They don't want to see the,
Alert from calendar.
They want
Latest
to
web
just
trends for planning a read time.
They want to get the information on their balance. That's it. So, that's the kind of thing where analytics become real important on that too. Giving people what they want.
Got it. Well, it looks like that's the last question that we had. So I guess in wrap up, if there's anything else, any kind of one last point that you guys would like to make, the floor is yours to do that. Otherwise, we certainly thank everybody for their attention and for attending today's webinar. And if obviously you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Again, my name is Brian Munson, Director of Member Development at NCBA. You can reach out to myself. Can put you directly in touch with the folks at MindActive. So Byron or Philip, anything else left to add?
Yeah, just that for any of you that are attending the PCC and the ACC convention or event, we'll be there as well. So feel free to stop by and ask any additional questions or see if there's anything that you come up with, and we'd be glad to sit down and talk with you if you're going to be at that in Minneapolis, I believe. Yeah.
Yep. September 8th through September 11th at the Depot Renaissance is the Purchasing Cooperatives Conference, and the annual Cooperatives Conference. They're going to be held back-to-back. There's going to be some fantastic sessions on technology. At the Purchasing Conference, there's going to be a blueprint for the Cooperative Decade Workshop with Dame Pauline Green. So if any of the folks that are on the webinar are interested in those kind of things or have any other questions, definitely give myself a shout, either by phone or email. I can fill you in. And MindActive will be there on site. And we hope that, that everyone can join us. If not, stay tuned. I'm sure we'll have more from MindActive in the coming months.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a great day. Bye now.